Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. The press has been claiming that 130 degrees Fahrenheit measured at Death Valley, California during the summer of 2020 was a world's record. But as is normally the case, what they're saying simply isn't true. 1913 brought some of the most extreme weather in U.S. history, including a world record temperature of 134 degrees Fahrenheit on July 10th. Death Valley went over 130 degrees on 3 days that week. The official records were well documented and taken at a very well-sighted thermometer. But climate alarmists want that record erased because it doesn't suit their agenda. The 134 degrees at Death Valley in 1913 was remarkable. But even more impressive was on June 17, 1859, when Santa Barbara, California, along the coast rose to 133 degrees Fahrenheit for several hours. Normally, Santa Barbara is quite cool, being along the cold Pacific Ocean. But on that date, downslope winds blowing out of the northwest brought some extreme heat. About 1 o'clock p.m., a blast of hot air from the northwest swept suddenly over the town and struck the inhabitants with terror. It was quickly followed by others. At 2 o'clock, the thermometer exposed to the air rose to 133 degrees and continued at or near that point for nearly 3 hours, while the burning wind raised dense clouds of dust. No human being could withstand the heat. All betook themselves to their dwellings and carefully closed every door and window. The thick adobe walls would have required days to have become warmed and were consequently an admirable protection. Calves, rabbits, birds were killed, trees were blighted, fruit was blasted and fell to the ground, burned only on one side, and gardens were ruined. This was from an 1869 report, but the press reported on the event extensively when it happened in 1859. So what could have caused such unprecedented weather? A few weeks later came the largest solar storm on record. The auroras were seen almost all the way to the equator. The northern lights were so bright that lamplighters in cities considered turning the lights off. And telegraph lines were shut down around the world. The charged particles coming from the sun were putting so much electricity into the wires that operators couldn't even touch them. There was no fake news that day because the Associated Press was shut down. Around the same time as the record heat in California, there was a massive flood on the upper Mississippi River. And a few weeks prior to that, there was a disastrous flood on the Ohio River. During the autumn of 1859 came one of the most damaging storms in Great Britain's history. 96 vessels off the coast of Wales were completely wrecked. Another 530 were stranded or suffered other casualties. Around 600 people died. At the same time, California was continuing to suffer extreme heat. October 1859 brought unprecedented 110-degree temperatures to the California coast. The heat in Los Angeles was described as being like that from an oven. And then December of 1859 brought the most remarkable precipitation of rain ever known along the coast of Southern California. They had 1 foot of water within 24 hours, which is even more rain than they've had this week. The more I study the history of extreme weather, the more I see correlations between it and solar activity. If a solar storm is putting so much electricity into the wires that it shuts down communications, it can certainly also have a strong effect on the weather. But climate alarmists don't want to believe that the giant thermonuclear reactor in the sky controls the weather. They want to believe that the weather is controlled by a 1 part per 10,000 increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide over the past century. So instead of trying to understand the climate and understand weather, they simply choose to erase and rewrite history. We see this over and over again. Any history which is inconvenient simply disappears. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this anti-science cult for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Kyrie, and Caesar on the web at RealClimateScience.com.